Hi, I'm Caitlin E, and welcome back to the Lit Review. This stack of books beside me was part of my best of bracket, so I'm sorry for the mess. I am too lazy to clean it up. What we'll be doing today is actually my worst of bracket, my most disappointing books of 2023. Why I'm starting the year with some bad news is because I did the best, and I kind of feel like I should show you the worst too. And so these are all of my really low rated books. There are a few that have 3 stars that snuck into this list as well. So sometimes you just have a really good month and you end up with a 3-star book being your worst. So we'll see what happens. But if you watched my best of bracket, you know that I'm doing things a little bit differently. I have 16 books, 8 on either side, that I will be putting kind of head to head. So 12 books for the 12 books for the 12 months of the year, plus 4 honorable mentions that just didn't hit with me. And I will then be putting them head to head with 6 different categories. And those categories are character, world building, plot, writing quality, book cover, and then the last category, the final decision maker, will be emotions, like how emotionally connected I feel, or in this case, like how angry I was at the book. What I'm going to do with you now is go through each of the books that will be in the bracket and tell you like why they made me angry and or disappointed. And then, we'll talk about like the weaknesses, like what things really irked me about them. And then we'll go into the bracket and that'll like really keep us moving there. So let's kick this off with January. My worst book that I read in January of last year is called Just Say Snow to the Ex-Fiancé by Stacia Hart. This is something I found on Kindle Unlimited. And the character development was a real weak point for me. The plot was pretty flimsy and predictable, and the writing quality was just not it for me. It used some tropes poorly, and whenever that happens, wherever I can kind of feel the puppet master strings, like I feel like the writer is trying to be like, I can manipulate your emotions. And then when I feel that, my very stubborn brain goes, haha, no you can't. And then I get cranky. So that's basically what happened with Just Say Snow to the Ex-Fiancé. So January will be going head to head with an honorable mention category, and that is Carnal Cryptids by Vera Valentine. So I read that, I think like the spring or the summer. I didn't hate it, but I think I gave it 2.5 stars, and it could have been a 3-star read for me because I genuinely enjoy monster romance as a subgenre within paranormal romance. This one just crossed some lines for me, not my kink is really what a lot of this comes down to. The whole bracket is full of books whose kink execution just didn't hit for me, if we're going to be real honest about things. So Carnal Cryptids has a little bit of dubcon or dubious consent in it, and that is just not for me in most cases. Basically, the premise of this book is that like these cryptids have to feed on fear, and that there are certain people out there whose fear is just like yummy catnip to them, and the heroine is the catnip to these 3 cryptids who are already in kind of like a poly knot. So it was a why choose, which I love, and this just didn't slap the way I was hoping it would, and it had the dark side of primal play. So this could be for you, it's just not for me. I do feel like I should put that caveat on here, as most of us do when we talk about books. If I'm secretly talking about one of your faves, I'm sorry that I didn't like it, but it just wasn't for me. If some of this sounds interesting to you, regardless, like please go check these authors out. They were not for me under the circumstances. So then moving right along, into September, my least favorite, which I think got like a 2.75 or maybe a low 3 from me, Prime Minister by Sadie Haller and Ainsley Booth. And this one again was like my kinks did me dirty because it was a forbidden romance that I thought I was going to really enjoy. It was also a BDSM romance, but the BDSM components were like fairly lightweight, all things considered. It just had some power dynamics that I didn't enjoy. Like it is a political person, the prime minister, who has insta-lust for his intern. And I'm not inherently bothered by that as a premise. I read a lot of forbidden or sometimes taboo romances. The execution and the character, like the way, the possessiveness that ended up going down, like it just felt like I was reading a pretty toxic relationship. So it didn't overcome the hurdle of the forbidden, of the taboo, which I think good forbidden and taboo romances get you to buy into why it's worth hurdling that. This one just didn't. The writing quality wasn't there. Like, the writing quality did not stand out enough to make me feel like I could vibe with this. We'll be comparing that to my least favorite book from August, which was The Mistwalker by Regine Abel. This was just a deeply disappointing, I love a good monster romance. I'm sad that there are several of them on here. I didn't care for the main female character. I didn't like the way it felt to be in her head. It wasn't the romance or even the monster nature of it. It just, like, it did not feel like a fun time to be in the main character's head. The heroine is kind of like in a kind of like sci-fi dystopia where these mist creatures come and everybody has to like lock down their houses and all of that. And a mist creature gets in and it turns out he's her fated mate. Like, there are a lot of things that my brain was like, ooh, sounds delightful. And then the execution, it was just deeply unpleasant to be in the main female character's head. So there's something that could have been really cool about this, but it just didn't land. Like, I thought the plot was actually kind of interesting and the world building was kind of interesting. It really fell apart for me on writing quality and character. All right, April. April, there's a nonfiction on this list, and that is Everything I Need, I Get From You by Caitlin Tiffany. And I feel like this one kind of just deserves to be called out for user error on my part. I am not a One Direction stan person. Like, I don't have strong feelings about them. I don't have negative ones, but I don't have strong ones. And it turns out, if I had been a little bit more savvy, I would know that that's what this book would have been about because it's a lyric. And I just didn't. And so I went in because the subtitle of this is like How Fangirls Changed the Internet as We Know It, which I thought was super interesting. And there is discussion of other types of fandom, other types of fangirl behavior, but it is aggressively about One Direction and also the author's kind of experience with One Direction and like the joy and like fangirl nature of it. So it was like an interesting read, but it didn't hit the way I wanted it to. So it's not that it was a bad book. I was just disappointed in it because I thought I was getting a much more in-depth and nuanced take on what it meant to be a fangirl, but I instead got like a fandom specific take on what it means to be a fangirl, which is great, but it just wasn't my fandom. So that's what the problem with that one was. That'll be going up against a new adult title, Let's Talk About Love by Claire Kahn. I think this could also technically be YA. This one 100% fell apart because of character and probably writing quality. I thought on premise alone this was going to be my jam because it is a like new adult, young adult, kind of crossing that line a little bit, but the main female character is asexual and kind of like trying to discover what it means for herself as well as her potential partners to like basically not want to have sex with them, but to have different types of intimacy with them and like how to explain that to people, how to like explain that to herself and like navigate that while she's also going through these really important changes about, you know, being in college and getting a job and, you know, surviving and all of that stuff that I just thought would be like really resonant and interesting to read about. But the execution, the female main character drove me bonkers. She was a very unpleasant person, again, to be in the main headspace of. She was, I will say, unlikable for my own, you know, I don't necessarily think that all main characters have to be likable. I think that's a trap and a false trap at that. But I did not enjoy being a part of her life. Like, I didn't want to listen to her, despite the fact that I thought she could have had interesting things to say. So that's why that one's there. All right, and then the last two on the first half of the bracket. December's pick was Neutral Zone by Tegan Hunter, which is nuts to me. This, I think, ended up being a 2.5 star read for me because it got some... Breathe. Again, on premise, should have been my jam. It is a hockey player and a cam girl romance, and I thought the combination of those two things were going to be my favorite. And I just didn't like the writing quality, and as a result of that, didn't like the characters. The plot was like barely there. It took things like camgirl and voyeurism and like possessive heroes into an uncomfortable stalkery place instead of a like celebration of sexuality place, and that made me sad. It also made me sad because Tegan Hunter had a 4-star book that I actually really loved earlier this year, so it was a real hit and miss with that series. Same series, by the way. I'm so sad about that. But that Neutral Zone is going up with my May pick, which is Miss Lattimore's Letters by Suzanne Allen. So this is one that I gave a 3-star to. I'm not actually that mad at it. May was just a really good reading month for me. Why I think it's in this one is it disappointed me in the sense of I was really hoping for more of a traditional romance experience, in that I was hoping I was going to get some smut, and I didn't. It is not even a closed door romance. It is a smooch only romance. So if you are interested in like the emotional resonance of a romance without a lot of the heat, this could actually be a great pick for you. I thought it was a delightful book for most of it. Like the writing quality is really good. It is like a modern Jane Austen feel to it. There's a lot of like pining and tension and like social court etiquette sort of thing. So there's a lot to like about this book. I was just deeply disappointed that I didn't get any of the characters to end up together in a way that I wanted to see on the page. So that's why it's here. It's a kind of loose thing, but not all of these months are going to have like deeply disappointing or upsetting reads, thankfully. But that's why that's there. I don't need to reread it though. You know, like I got rid of it. Almost all of these books you're not going to see in my hands because they're already gone. Like I've already gotten rid of them. They're not part of my life anymore. All right, we're now on the other side of the bracket, which you will see set up momentarily. But my February most disappointing was Lourdes and the Mafia by Alira Anaya series, which again is disappointing because I read another book from this author that is in the same series of this that I actually really liked. And the main character of this Lourdes was one of my favorite characters, supporting characters from the first book that I read, Queenie and the Krakens. So this just disappointed me because I thought her character development went out the window. And the smut was great. There was a lot of great smut. There was still decent plot, but it had some pretty hectic plot holes that was very frustrating to read about. And I just didn't think the writing quality was as good as it was in Queenie and the Krakens. So it felt like another like big gap. And this is what I mean by like, I feel like my kinks and my romances really, when they disappoint me, man, they disappoint me hard. So that's why that book was my bad pick for February. And then that's going to go up against an honorable mention. I believe I read this one in January, but boy, howdy did it make me cranky. And that is Hawk by Kat Savage. Again, on paper, I thought I was going to be a happy little camper, and I was not. This is a romance about a like tattoo shop owner and I believe she's a single mom. And their chemistry was really good. Again, slut shaming though. Very, very subtle, actually not subtle misogyny really going through this. Like the way the female main character talks and thinks about other women is not great. And the way men, not the hero, but other men think about her or verbalize their thoughts about the main female character, also not great. So that was just very unpleasant. And despite there being some fun banter between the two of them, just wasn't about the characters and their worldviews. So, yeesh. That's a no for me. Then moving right along, we have October. And my worst read in October was How Not to Date a Demon by Lana Cole. It's a novella, and I really think it struggled in terms of writing quality, plot, and pacing with its short form. I didn't mind the characters. I didn't love them, but they didn't have a lot of depth to them either. So I just feel like this is one of those books that like struggled under the burden of being a novella, and like sometimes that happens. I don't hate this one, but it just wasn't my fave. I know that Lana Cole has written some of the books in the like the sweet verse with Catherine Moon, who is one of my favorite romance authors in the indie scene, in the self-pub scene. So I was disappointed that Lana Cole, who often collaborates with Catherine Moon, just like wasn't up to par with my expectations and experience. And And then that book will be going up against another one that like really just butters my biscuits. It just makes me mad. And that's July's pick. That's Paper Heart by Grace McGinty. Once again, a book that on premise had me in a chokehold. It was a contemporary Why Choose, where the female main character, for plot hole oriented reasons, ends up becoming like the live-in editor for 3 men who are basically doing OnlyFans. And so she ends up editing a lot of their smut, which was great. That part was really fun and really well executed. What absolutely tilted me off the axis of this earth is how much body shaming and homophobia came out of the female main character's mouth. Was not cool with that at all. There are 2 of the male main characters that are in a relationship, and they're clearly bi. They are clearly bi, and she's like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to break you up with your boyfriend. You must be gay. And I'm like, no, they're telling you they're bi. Respect that they're telling you that they're bi. Anyway, my battery's dying. I'm gonna need a minute. So sorry about that. I just had to switch to my phone. So if the sound quality or the image quality changes, I'm sorry. I do need to recharge my proper camera battery. Whole drama thing where I also seem to have misplaced my camera charger for my backup camera. But anyway, I was telling you how angry I was at Grace McGinty. Just didn't really, like, the premise was so cool. I liked the plot of this book, such as it was. Really did not like the way the main character thought about a lot of things in the world. Let's just leave it there. Let's see, I have 4 more to go through. In March, I read a very tiny piece of fiction called The Governesses by Anne Sayre. This one was just an oddball. Like it's a translated work, originally published in the early 90s and translated from French. I believe it's being turned into an A24 movie, which honestly should tell you a lot about the vibes, the specific flavor of weird vibes that this book has. For me, it was one of the books that, like, why I would not recommend this, why it was so disappointing, and ultimately it made me kind of angry, is because of the writing quality. Like, it is a dreamy, poetic type of writing quality, but it is also written by somebody who clearly thinks that they are smarter than you and me. And they might be. Like, they bluntly might be. I don't know. I just found myself deeply frustrated by how clever the author clearly felt they were being. There was no character development. I'm not even sure there was meant to be, and I think that's part of the author's problem. This is like one of those books that I just picked up because the cover was interesting when I found it at like a book fair many years ago, and when I finally read it, deeply disappointed. So next is so The Governesses will be going up against one of my honorable mentions, and this is another one that I gave 3 stars to. I don't necessarily think it's a bad book, but it didn't hit the way I was hoping it would, so it kind of falls into that, like, not bad but disappointing category, and that's Waking Olivia by Elizabeth O'Rourke. I read this for part of my Romancing the Tarot series that I'm slowly making my way through here on this channel, and it does have tropes that I like. I like a forbidden romance. I like an age gap romance. What I don't like is the pace of this plot. It really didn't have a lot of breathing room. It was kind of slow, and then it like escalated really quickly and then ramped up in a way that felt very unsatisfying. And the female main character's like not in spoilery but traumatic backstory was resolved so poorly. So there's a lot of like plot issues that I had with this. I don't necessarily think the female main character is super likable inherently. I think she gets there. She like grows, does have a bit of an emotional journey. I also just like, it's not gonna land well for me when there's infidelity as a plot point. It's just not gonna work for me. So that's part of why that one's on the bracket, and it was disappointing because I know that Jess from Peace Love Books XO really loves this book, and so I tend to align pretty strongly with her recommendation. So this one was just, it didn't work for me the same way it did for her. And that's okay. My November pick, my most disappointing book, was The Fastest Way to Fall by Denise Williams. As part of a video that I don't think I actually put up, it was a continuation of that same Romancing the Tarot series. I will put that up soon. But spoiler for that, I did not enjoy this one. And it wasn't even that I thought it was bad. It was another like, oh, it just didn't land. I do think Denise Williams as an author did something that I thought was really smart. Like, she put it up front that she was like, I'm not here to write like a perfectly secure fat woman. Like, I'm not. I want her to have some real problems and to struggle with some of it. And I thought that was like good, actually. Like, I enjoyed that she did that. There are some pretty serious content warnings for this as far as I'm concerned, including specifically the big one that I want to call out here is that there is like some eating disorder content. And I think maybe that was glossed over a little bit in some ways, in ways that kind of like just made me uncomfortable. I do think the characters as individuals are dynamic and interesting to read about. So this is another like, I didn't hate it. It was just disappointing. I don't really like their love story. Like, I don't think that they deserve to end up together in the end. And like, that's part of what puts them on this list for me. And that was like that's so rare for me in romance, truly so rare, that it was just a disappointing read in that way. Fastest Way to Fall will be going up against my last pick, which is my June worst pick. And that's People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. Man alive, this Romancing the Tarot series has given me some zingers. It's given me some really good books too, by the way. Like at least one or two of the books I mentioned on my best came from me reading through that series. But I have learned, so this is my second Emily Henry book. Y'all, I don't think I'm an Emily Henry girl. Whatever it is about her that makes the majority of readers very content and happy, it's not mixing with my brain chemistry. I'm just gonna say that. My biggest thing, and actually the reason why I don't like her books, is her female main characters. They're the worst little gingerbread women. They are the same quirky, manic pixie dream girl who takes issue with her male love interest for reasons that are opaque and kind of dumb, and then they fix it with lust. Like, I'm not an Emily Henry person. I think this is the last Emily Henry book I ever read. If I read more of them, it will be as an experiment. But she's not for me. She's just not for me. All right, so I have got a setup here in Canva where I will be doing the quadrants. So they'll go head to head, these books that I just told you about, but they will be going head to head under very specific categories. Because I think part of what makes a bracket interesting is the upsets. If you had asked me what my worst book of the year was, I would probably have an answer for you, and we will talk about that at the end, so we can kind of compare to see how the bracket did. But you'll see like the little dotted lines here on the bracket. So each quadrant will have one of the categories I mentioned. The like semifinals will have a category, and then the final decision of what was the worst and or most disappointing book of 2023 will come down to my emotions, because clearly I have a lot of them. You saw a lot of my barely constrained book rage in this video already. So let's talk. I'm gonna just run back the same categories that I did for my best. And so we're gonna start with book covers. So which book cover is just not great? Because, you know, I think sometimes you always hear the saying of don't judge a book by its cover. Well, sometimes you do. Sometimes you don't want to pick something up because the cover's not fancy. It's not speaking to you. I will say I couldn't find the actual cover that I have for my honorable mention pick here, Carnal Cryptids, because I have a special edition cover from Renegade Romance. And the cover for that, I'll see if I can find a better picture of it, but I couldn't for the sake of this. But the cover of that is actually freaking adorable and really spicy. So I think the worst cover has to go to Just Say Snow to the Ex-Fiancé by Stasia Hart, which is also fair because I just am really mad at that book. We also have another special edition cover going up against the regular schmegular cover, and that is Prime Minister by Ainsley Booth and Sadie Haller and The Mistwalker by Regine Abel. I know a lot of people don't like real people on the cover. That's just not for them. I don't have that problem. However, I do think Prime Minister has the worst cover. Like, it's just not grabbing. I mean, it's like a vague, handsome white dude on the cover, and sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's nice. I don't think it's that special though. You know, like it's fine. So I think it gets to beat out the Mistwalker because at least the Mistwalker has an interesting cover, right? Like it's paranormal romance, it's grabbing. Now, on the issue of cover again, I do think Just Say Snow to the Ex-Fiancé gets the win here. I think it's the worst cover because again, I don't actually mind real people on the cover. I don't find Prime Minister as a cover to be inherently offensive or troubling to me. I am, however, starting to get a little sick of cartoon covers, friends, especially when those cartoon covers hold bad books. Just a thought. So that's our winner in this category, our loser in this category, I guess. Just Say Snow to the Ex-Fiancé by Stasia Hart will enter into the quarterfinals based on its cover. And then I believe we did writing quality for the lower quadrant. And so writing quality is tricky when we compare April's pick of Everything I Need I Get From You and the honorable mention of Let's Talk About Love by Claire Kahn. Actually, the more I think about it, I don't think it's that hard because I didn't dislike Everything I Need I Get From You. Like I thought the journalistic quality of that combined with some of the memoir-esque elements of Caitlin Tiffany kind of like talking about her own fandom experience. Like I didn't mind that. I didn't think that was poorly written. I thought it was decent. I think Let's Talk About Love did struggle with writing quality and the way that branches out into some of the other categories. It was an easy read and sometimes that's fantastic, but sometimes that is also a letdown. And I think the worst writing quality belongs to Let's Talk About Love by Claire Kahn, which ultimately I think is also fair because I didn't dislike Everything I Get From You to the same degree. Ooh, now we're going to compare Neutral Zone by Tegan Hunter and Miss Lattimore's Letters by Suzanne Allain. Same deal. I didn't actually object to the writing quality of Miss Lattimore's Letters. I thought it was actually really good. I compared it to Jane Austen. Like if you're a Jane Austen girly and you're looking for something like just with a sprinkle more romance, just like a single sprinkle, like not a lot. Don't get sugar high on it or anything. It's not going to get you there. But a sprinkle of more romance, then I would actually recommend Miss Lattimore's Letters. For my folks out there who do not like spicy, smutty romances, but like pining, I would highly recommend Miss Lattimore's Letters. I'm just not your girl for that. Neutral Zone for the writing quality, because I think it was patchy and inconsistent. Neutral Zone totally beats out that category. It's tough though, comparing Neutral Zone and Let's Talk About Love. If it were another category, I feel like this would actually be easier for me to like break it down. But when we talk about writing quality, like that can be sentence structure, that can be, it does in some ways have to do with character and plot. Oh, look, it's raining. Oh, double rainbow. Can you see the rainbow? Rainbow. Also, that's my backyard. Yeah, you can at least see the one rainbow. That's cool. Okay, back over here. I think it's Let's Talk About Love. I really think it is. I feel like, actually, no, I'm gonna take that back. I think it's Neutral Zone, which is crazy to me because I did really enjoy the writing and the characters and all of that good stuff in another Tegan Hunter book earlier in the year. But Neutral Zone, in comparison to the same author that I had read, it's like her quality just took a dive, an absolute nosedive. Whereas Let's Talk About Love, I feel like I had very specific issues with like character development, which is part of writing quality, but not actually the tangible writing itself. I did still think there were some really great quotes in Let's Talk About Love. I can't say the same for Neutral Zone, which is why it's going to win. Now we are on the right side of the bracket. What category did we use? We did plot. Yeesh. All right, so Lourdes and the Mafia by Alira Anaya series versus Hawk by Kat Savage. Okay, so Lourdes and the Mafia had some plot holes to it, but it did have a lot going on in the plot, which it was at least engaging. You know, I have to give it some credit. There's demons, there's murder threat, you know, there was some stuff going on. The plot of Hawk was way more simple, which isn't a bad thing. Simple can be good. I actually do think the plot of Hawk was better than Lourdes because I don't think there were any plot holes. in Lourdes. Now, so I started this little conversation thinking I knew which way it was going. But then I think Hawke gets to... Actually, no, wait. No, delete. Actually, I think that means that Lourdes is the one that moves forward because there were plot holes that I couldn't reconcile, and Hawke was a simple plot, but done reasonably well. My issues had more to do with character. So Lourdes and the Mafia regrettably moves on. I'm still just so sad about this. I really wanted to love this book so much more. Plot of How Not to Date a Demon versus by How Not to Date a Demon by Lana Cole versus Pay Per Heart by Grace McGinty. This is also tricky because most of my issues here weren't about plot with these two. I think maybe How Not to Date a Demon gets to advance here because I think it struggled under some structure and like just needed more plot, like it needed more depth. It was lacking in depth. Whereas like Pay Per Heart, my issues with it were again character and writing quality. So this is a tricky one, but I do think like there were some gaps in both of the plots. I just think the lack of a plot hurt How Not to Date a Demon more. Now let's compare Lourdes and the Mafia and How Not to Date a Demon. Plot holes in Lourdes versus not enough plot in How Not to Date a Demon. I will take plot holes over not enough plot. So I think that means that How Not to Date a Demon is unfortunately moving forward. I think in other respects, Lourdes probably would have beat it out, but that's just my personal preference. Like, I'm really picky about novellas. I hold them to maybe an unfair standard. All right, so the bottom quadrant, bottom right, we're going character. Which of these books had the worst character and or character development? Oh boy, that's an easy one. If we're putting against The Governesses by Anne Sayre and Waking Olivia by Elizabeth O'Rourke, The Governesses wins that one by a mile. Like, the character development was non-existent. Whereas Waking Olivia, while I do take issue with some of the characters and character development, I think they were well realized even if I didn't enjoy them. So my issue with The Governesses is that you made me read this book that I don't actually think has character. Okay, okay, we're going to compare the character issues in The Fastest Way to Fall by Denise Williams and People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. So I'm going to try really hard to set aside my personal issues with Emily Henry because I just don't like her books in summation. Out of the two I've read, like, I've given them reluctant 3 stars. Like, there's nothing wrong or offensive with them. They just anti-click with me because I don't think they deserve all the hype. If you love them, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The Fastest Way to Fall, I think, does edge out Emily Henry and People We Meet on Vacation. So I don't really like Poppy as a character. I find her like actually annoying and not worthy of her love interest, to be frank. Whereas you get multiple POVs in The Fastest Way to Fall, and I think both of those POVs kind of fall short. They are dynamically written, so they are like better in that respect. But I don't think... Actually, you know what? I'm going to take that back. I've talked myself into it again. They were dynamically written and I didn't like them, but that's not really what I'm asking. I'm not asking whether or not I liked them, which I guess I kind of am. I'm not basing this entire conversation on whether or not I liked the characters, although that's a component of it. I think ultimately the characters in The Fastest Way to the Fall, I liked them about the same as Emily Henry's book, but I thought they were more dynamically written. There was more depth to who they were as people, whereas I think my big issue with Emily Henry is one that you don't get enough of. You're usually trapped in the woman's head, and I don't like the way she writes women. Now, comparing The Governesses by Anne Sayre to People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry, I think The Governesses, again, just like wins the day here, because there was no character development. As much as I can gripe about Emily Henry and why I just don't enjoy her books as a reading experience, and character plays a huge part in that. Actually, a linchpin portion of why I do not like Emily Henry books is her characters. At least they're there, you know, like they're serving a purpose. They are going through a thing. They have an arc. I can't say any of that for The Governesses. So I think that one gets to move forward in the bracket. All right, semifinal category is world building. Yikes. So we're going to compare Just Say Snow to the Ex-Fiancé by Stancia Hart and Neutral Zone by Tegan Hunter. This is going to be a rough category all the way around. So it's hard in a contemporary romance to talk about world building because there's not like you're building on a magic system or you're not realizing a time period that me, the reader, has never experienced. You are, however, sometimes creating like a place and an environment that is either going to work for me or not. So Just Say Snow takes place in kind of like a mountain resort. And Neutral Zone takes place in a city and around like a hockey team. I do think in a weird way, the world building and like setup of Just Say Snow is better because like the female main character is going to this singles event at a mountain resort because she needs to prove that her math works for a book that she's written. And she needs to return to the big city to do promo for her book on basically like a Today Show equivalent. So there's actually like a lot of plot-oriented world building when it comes to Just Say Snow, whereas Neutral Zone, it's kind of relying on you having read the rest of the series and caring about hockey and like the surrounding characters. There's not a lot of like development of the space, of the environment. So I think actually Neutral Zone gets to be worse here, which is kind of surprising. Really surprising, actually. I feel like that's a bit of an upset. If you had asked me, I would have said which one I liked least. I didn't think it was going to be that one. So then comparing some odd duck fantasies. So How Not to Date a Demon by Lana Cole versus the kind of like vague magical realism of The Governesses by Anne Sayre. I think How Not to Date a Demon has better world building. Because there is like at least a description of magic and the stakes and some of the like the parts of what made the space paranormal, especially for a novel format. Both of these are like shorter form books, and I think Lana Cole did a better job with world building in the time that she had than Anne Sayre did in The Governesses, which is again relying on like this weird over-sexualized Edwardian type of landscape. I don't even know if I'm using the right time period when I'm saying Edwardian. That's just my best guess. Regardless, The Governesses is going to move forward in the bracket. And then the final category is emotional, because I, at the end of the day, am a deeply emotion-driven reader. When I think about the books that I love, or in this case, hate, it's emotion. It's in the name of love and hate, essentially. And a lot of this also comes down to just like how angry did these books make me. Neutral Zone by Tegan Hunter versus The Governesses by Anne Sayre. I think you can read my face and see where we're going, but let's talk it out. Neutral Zone was very disappointing to me and really made me sad and angry because it took some of my tropes and things that I thought I was really gonna love, and it made me so disappointed, like so disappointed, that they just didn't execute well. So I'm like resentful at Neutral Zone because I thought I had found a new indie author that I was gonna vibe with, and now I'm just not so sure. I'm really second guessing myself with Tegan Hunter, even though I did like one of her other books in this series. Then with The Governesses by Anne Sayre, I'm just mad that I read it. Like I got sucked in by what I thought was an interesting cover. The back jacket made it sound like this kind of like dreamy, interesting, sensual, but not a romance kind of thing. And I was like, that's potentially cool. And then what I read, I just felt so dumb, and also felt like the author was sure I was dumb too. Like they were just so secure of their own smarts. And that made me angry while I was reading it. At a totally different level. So I think the winner, or in this case, the loser, is The Governesses by Anne Sayre. And if you were going to ask me which book out of these 16 made me the angriest out of all of these, or the most disappointed, I think The Governesses is accurate. Like, I think top to toe, with the exception of the cover, because I do think the cover is interesting, I think this one was just not for me. I will probably think about this book well beyond what it deserves because I will be angry about it. You know, like that's its legacy, is that I'm mad. That is the worst book of 2023 for me. And, you know, I told you at the end that I was going to talk through whether or not I actually thought the brackets pick would be my core emotional worst pick. And in this case, I think it is. Like, there are maybe some other books that I have like unexplainable angst for. Like, I popped off on Emily Henry there in a way that I wasn't prepared to. I also am grumpy at Just Say Snow to the Ex-Fiancé for reasons I've already detailed in a very past video. But I think the one that like I genuinely think is the worst thing I read this year is The Governesses. So I think the bracket nailed it. I raised my blood pressure making this video, but it was entertaining, hopefully. So thank you for spending time with me. I hope you have a fantastic reading day or night, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Hold on, girl, now wait just a minute. I've got something to say, you should hear it.